A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Shattered Reflections. The fluorescent lights above Maya's hospital bed buzzed with an incessant hum that seemed to vibrate through her skull. She'd been awake for 20 minutes now, staring at the white ceiling tiles and trying to remember why everything felt so wrong. The nurses had told her she'd been unconscious for 3 weeks after a car accident, but the explanation felt hollow, like an echo in an empty room. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror was a stranger's face. Copper brown hair fell past her shoulders, longer than she somehow expected. Green eyes stared back at her, searching for recognition that never came. A thin scar traced along her neck, disappearing beneath the hospital gown. The woman looking back could have been anyone. The only familiar thing was the dull ache in her chest, a constant pressure that made breathing feel like work. "Maya, are you awake, sweetheart?" The voice belonged to a man who appeared in the doorway like he'd stepped from a magazine cover. Golden hair caught the harsh hospital lighting, and amber eyes that should have been warm somehow left her cold. He was tall, probably 6 feet, with the kind of perfect features that made other people stare. Blake Sterling, her fiancé, according to everyone who'd visited. 26 years old, heir to something important that she couldn't quite grasp. "How are you feeling today?" Blake approached her bed with measured steps, his smile practiced and patient. "The doctors say you can come home soon." Home. The word should have brought comfort, but instead, it sent an inexplicable chill down her spine. "I still don't remember anything," she admitted, watching his face carefully. "Nothing about us, about our life together. They say I'm 23, but I feel like I'm missing 23 years of existence." Something flickered across his expression, too quick to identify. Relief, perhaps? "That's normal after trauma like yours," he said, settling into the visitor's chair like he belonged there. "Your memories will return gradually. The important thing is that you're alive and safe." Safe, another word that felt foreign on her tongue. She pulled the thin hospital blanket higher, suddenly aware of how exposed she felt under his steady gaze. "The nurses mentioned someone else visited me. Before you arrived, they said he was..." She searched for the exact words the elderly nurse had whispered. "Dangerous looking." Blake's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Probably just hospital staff. You know how gossip spreads in small towns. People love to create drama where there isn't any. He reached for her hand, and she forced herself not to flinch away from his touch. His skin was warm, his grip firm, but nothing about it felt right. "I've been worried sick about you, Maya. These past 3 weeks have been the longest of my life." 3 weeks, she repeated, testing the timeline. "Where were you immediately after the accident? If we're engaged, wouldn't you have been the first person they called?" "I was out of town on business." "Pack business." The explanation came too quickly, too smooth. "Communication is spotty in the Northern Territories. I got here as soon as I could. Pack business." Another piece of information that felt important, but remained frustratingly out of reach. She knew, somehow, that she was different from regular humans. The knowledge sat in her bones like an inherited memory, but the details remained shrouded in fog. When she'd asked the doctors about feeling strange, they'd attributed it to the head injury. But this felt deeper, more fundamental. A young nurse with kind eyes appeared in the doorway, carrying a small plastic bag. "Miss Winters? These are your personal belongings from the accident. We've been keeping them safe for you." Blake stood abruptly. "I'll take those. Maya needs to rest." "Actually," Maya interjected, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice, "I'd like to see them. Maybe something will help trigger a memory." The nurse looked between them uncertainly before handing Maya the bag. Blake's displeasure was palpable, but he couldn't object without seeming controlling. Inside were a few items that should have been familiar but weren't. A silver bracelet with intricate wolf designs, a cell phone with a cracked screen, her wallet containing an ID that confirmed her identity as Maya Winters, and a worn leather purse that felt expensive between her fingers. As she rifled through the purse's contents, her fingers found something unexpected tucked into a hidden pocket she hadn't noticed at first. A small piece of paper, folded carefully and wedged behind the fabric lining. Her heart rate quickened as she unfolded it, aware of Blake's sharp attention. Written in bold, unfamiliar handwriting were 7 words that made her breath catch. The truth is in Shadowfen. CH. What's that? Blake's voice had lost its gentle tone entirely. I don't know. She folded the note quickly, palming it with practiced ease that surprised her. Just an old receipt. But even as she lied, something deep inside her stirred. Shadowfen. The name resonated like a distant bell, calling to a part of her that the accident hadn't managed to destroy. And those initials, CH, sent an unexpected warmth through her chest, followed immediately by a stab of longing so sharp it left her breathless. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she could almost hear a voice calling her name, low and rough and desperate. Blake was watching her intently, his amber eyes calculating. Your color's better today, he said, but his tone suggested he was thinking about something else entirely. I think it's time we got you home where you belong. The pack is eager to see you recovered, where she belonged. The pack. More pieces of a puzzle she couldn't solve. Maya nodded because it was expected, but the phrase felt like a cage closing around her. As Blake launched into plans for her homecoming, describing a life that sounded comfortable but sterile, she clutched the mysterious note in her palm, the paper warm against her skin. We'll take things slowly, Blake continued, his voice taking on that practiced patience again. The house has been prepared for your return. Everyone understands you need time to readjust. The pack physician thinks familiar surroundings will help restore your memories. But what if she didn't want those memories restored? What if the life Blake described, comfortable, predictable, safe, wasn't what she'd chosen before the accident? The note in her hand suggested she'd been seeking truth somewhere else. From someone else. Someone whose mere initials made her heart race with recognition her conscious mind couldn't access. That night, alone in her hospital bed with Blake finally gone, Maya dreamed of golden eyes filled with fury and disappointment. Not Blake's amber gaze, but something wilder, more primal. She woke with tears on her cheeks and the absolute certainty that somewhere out there, someone was missing her just as desperately as she was missing them. Someone whose name started with C and whose heart was somehow connected to hers across whatever distance or deception separated them. The truth is in Shadowfen, the note had said. Maybe it was time she found out what that truth was, no matter what Blake or anyone else tried to tell her about her life. The woman in the mirror might be a stranger, but the ache in her chest was real, and it was leading her somewhere Blake clearly didn't want her to go. Chapter 2. Gilded Cage. The drive to Moonridge territory took 2 hours through winding mountain roads that should have felt familiar, but didn't. Maya pressed her face to the passenger window, watching dense forests give way to manicured landscapes that screamed wealth and control. Blake drove with easy confidence, pointing out landmarks that meant nothing to her fractured memory. That's where we had our first official date, he said, gesturing toward an expensive restaurant nestled between towering pines. You wore that green dress I bought you. Said it brought out your eyes. Maya nodded politely, but the image felt foreign. Had she really been the type of woman who let men choose her clothing? Something about that notion sat wrong in her stomach, like swallowing glass. The Moonridge Pack territory emerged from the forest like a small city designed by someone with unlimited resources and questionable taste. Pristine streets lined with massive houses, perfectly maintained gardens, and an underlying sense of surveillance that made Maya's skin crawl. Everyone they passed stopped to stare, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and something that looked uncomfortably like pity. Blake's house, their house, he corrected when she made the distinction, was a monument to success and control. 3 stories of glass and stone that managed to look both impressive and soulless. The interior was worse. Expensive furniture arranged with museum precision, family photos that featured her smiling beside Blake in poses that looked more like political statements than moments of genuine affection. Welcome home, Blake said, his hand possessive at the small of her back. I had the staff prepare your favorite meal. Hopefully familiar tastes will help trigger some memories. Maya's supposed favorite meal was salmon with herbs she couldn't identify, served on china that cost more than most people's cars. It tasted like nothing. Cardboard expensive enough to impress visitors but lacking any real substance. She pushed food around her plate, while Blake discussed pack business with easy familiarity, as if 3 weeks of her unconsciousness had been merely an inconvenience in his schedule. "The northern border negotiations are proceeding smoothly," he was saying to his beta, a nervous man named Derek, who kept shooting Maya uncomfortable glances. "The Shadowfen pact continues to be problematic, but nothing we can't handle." Shadowfen. Maya's fork paused halfway to her mouth. There was that name again, the one from the cryptic note still hidden in her pocket. "Tell me about Shadowfen," she said casually, watching Blake's reaction. His entire demeanor shifted, amber eyes hardening with something that looked like hatred. "There are enemies, Maya. Brutal, uncivilized wolves who respect nothing but violence. Their alpha is particularly dangerous." He reached across to cover her hand with his. "Promise me you'll stay away from the northern borders. Those animals would hurt you without hesitation." Animals. The word carried such venom that Maya wondered what exactly had happened between the packs. But when she tried to ask for details, Blake deflected with practiced ease, suggesting she rest and let her memories return naturally. Her bedroom was a shrine to a life she couldn't remember. Clothes in her size filled a walk-in closet, all in colors and styles that felt wrong against her skin. The bed was enormous, clearly meant for two, but Blake retreated to a guest room with explanations about giving her space to heal. His consideration should have been touching, but instead, it felt like performance. That first night in Moonridge, Maya's dreams were violent and fragmented. She saw herself arguing with Blake, her voice raised in fury about something she couldn't quite grasp. She saw golden eyes again, but not Blake's. These were wilder, storm-colored, filled with desperate longing. She woke gasping, her heart racing with emotions that had no context. Days blurred into a routine of comfortable imprisonment. Blake was attentive without being overwhelming, bringing her flowers and organizing visits from pack members who claimed to be her friends. But their conversations felt rehearsed, as if everyone had agreed on a script that painted her pre-accident life in broad, uncomplicated strokes. Maya, the dutiful fiancée. Maya, the perfect pack daughter. Maya, who never caused trouble or asked difficult questions. The problem was her wolf. Blake explained that shifting trauma sometimes caused temporary disconnection from one's wolf spirit. But Maya could feel her other half buried deep inside, not damaged, but deliberately silent. It was like having a piece of herself locked away, tantalizingly out of reach. "Your wolf will return when you're ready," Blake assured her during one of their walks through the manicured pack grounds. Some things can't be forced. But Maya suspected her wolf wasn't returning because something, or someone, was keeping it suppressed. The suspicion grew stronger when she noticed how quickly Blake changed subjects whenever she mentioned feeling disconnected or asked about her life before their supposed relationship began. A week into her stay, Maya discovered the locked room on the second floor. She'd been exploring the house, trying to trigger memories, when she found a door that wouldn't open. When she asked Blake about it, his explanation was dismissive. "Just storage, old furniture, things we never use. Nothing interesting." But if it was just storage, why keep it locked? That night, Maya searched the house until she found spare keys in Blake's office. Her hands shook as she unlocked the forbidden door, pushing it open to reveal not storage but a fully furnished bedroom. Her bedroom, based on the personal items scattered around, books with her name written inside, clothes that actually felt like her style, photos that showed her laughing with people who weren't in any of the pictures downstairs. In one photo, she stood beside a campfire with a group of wolves in their human forms. Her smile was genuine, uninhibited, nothing like the careful expressions in Blake's official pictures. But what stopped her heart was the man standing slightly apart from the group. Tall, dark-haired, with storm-gray eyes that seemed to look directly at her through the photograph. Even in the picture, the connection between them was obvious. On the back of the photo, someone had written "Summer Solstice Celebration" in handwriting she recognized as her own. But the celebration didn't look like anything from Moonridge territory. The setting was wilder, more natural, and everyone looked relaxed in a way that seemed impossible under Blake's rigid leadership. The full moon arrived with Maya still trapped in questions without answers. That night, she stood on the balcony of their bedroom, letting moonlight wash over her skin and hoping it would wake her sleeping wolf. For a moment, She felt something stir. Not her wolf, but a connection that stretched beyond the confines of Moonridge territory. A howl rose from somewhere deep in the forest, wild and lonely, and heartbreakingly familiar. Maya's breath caught as her body responded without conscious thought, her chest expanding as if to answer. But before sound could emerge, Blake's hand closed over her mouth from behind. "Don't," he whispered against her ear, his voice strangely urgent. "That's not meant for you." But every instinct Maya possessed screamed that it was meant for her. The howl came again, closer this time, and she felt her heart try to leap from her chest toward whatever was calling. Blake's grip tightened, and she realized with growing alarm that his careful patience was just another form of control. "I think I should leave," she said the next morning, testing his reaction. "Maybe visit other territories. See if anything triggers memories." Blake's mask slipped completely. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous for you out there, especially with your condition. You belong here, Maya, with your pack, with me. Belong." That word again, but now it sounded less like love and more like ownership. Maya smiled and nodded because she was learning to hide her thoughts. But inside, her resolve crystallized. Whatever truth lay in Shadowfen, whatever connection called to her from the forest, she was going to find it. Blake could lock away her room and control her daily routine, but he couldn't imprison the part of her that recognized deception when it wore the mask of protection. That night, she began planning her escape. Chapter 3. Into the Wild. Maya's escape came easier than expected, which should have been her first warning. Blake had left for pack business early that morning, kissing her forehead with the same possessive gentleness that made her skin crawl. Derek was stationed outside, supposedly for her protection, but his attention was focused on his phone rather than potential flight risks. She'd studied the territorial maps in Blake's office, memorizing the route to Shadowfen. The northern border lay 12 miles through dense forest, manageable for someone desperate enough to risk everything for answers. Maya slipped out through the kitchen, grateful for whatever instincts guided her steps silently across the manicured grounds and into the wild forest beyond. The moment she crossed into truly untamed territory, something inside her shifted. Her steps became surer, her senses sharper, as if the wilderness itself was welcoming her home. This felt right in a way that Moonridge's pristine comfort never had. Each mile deeper into the forest strengthened the pull she'd been fighting, drawing her north toward whatever truth waited in Shadowfen. The scent hit her first, pine and steel and something indefinably masculine that made her wolf stir for the first time since the hospital. Then came the sound of approaching footsteps, deliberate and unhurried. Maya froze behind a massive oak, heart hammering as a figure emerged from the morning shadows. He was tall, probably 6'2", with black hair that caught sunlight like polished obsidian. Tribal tattoos wound around his left arm, disappearing beneath a dark shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. But it was his eyes that stole her breath. Storm gray with flecks of blue, exactly like the man in her hidden photograph. When their gazes locked, recognition slammed through her like lightning. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was rougher than Blake's polished tones, carrying an edge that spoke of real authority rather than inherited privilege. But beneath the warning, Maya heard something else. Relief so profound it made her knees weak. "I'm looking for Shadowfen territory," she said, proud when her voice remained steady despite the chaos in her chest. "Someone told me I might find answers there." Something flickered across his features. Hope, maybe, or desperate longing quickly suppressed. Maya. Her name on his lips sounded like prayer and curse combined. "What has he done to you?" The question confirmed what she'd suspected. This man knew her, knew the truth Blake had been hiding. "I don't remember you," she admitted, stepping closer despite every warning Blake had given her about dangerous Shadowfen wolves. "But I know you're important. I can feel it." His laugh held no humor. "You can feel it. After everything he's put you through, you can still feel the connection." He studied her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but felt like coming home. "How much do you remember about the accident?" "Car accident. 3 weeks unconscious. Mysterious memory loss." Maya recited the official story, watching his expression darken with each word. "Blake says my memories will return gradually. That I need to be patient." Blake Sterling is a liar and a murderer. The words cut through the forest air like a blade, spoken with such conviction that Maya's carefully constructed world tilted sideways. There was no car accident, Maya. He hurt you when you tried to expose what he really is. The accusation should have shocked her, but instead, it felt like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Then tell me what really happened. Tell me who you are. I'm Cade Hunter, Alpha of the Shadowfen Pack. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the pain etched in the lines around his eyes. And 3 months ago, you chose me over him. Chosen him. The words resonated through her bones, waking echoes of emotions too strong to be completely erased. Maya's hand moved unconsciously to the scar on her neck, hidden beneath her collar. Did Blake do this to me? Cade's entire frame went rigid, hands clenching into fists at his sides. He found out about us. Found out you'd been investigating his activities, gathering evidence of his crimes. When you told him you were choosing love over duty, choosing me over pack politics, his voice broke slightly. He nearly killed you, Maya. Head trauma severe enough to cause selective amnesia. Then he played the devoted fiancé while you recovered, feeding you lies about your life. The forest spun around Maya as fragments of memory tried to surface. Blake's face twisted with rage, the taste of blood, desperate fear as consciousness faded. But the memories slipped away like smoke, leaving only the hollow certainty that Cade was telling the truth. Why should I trust you over him? She asked, though her heart was already providing the answer. For all I know, you're the dangerous one. Cade's smile was sharp with bitter understanding. Because you came here. Because despite having your memory stolen, despite weeks of Blake's manipulation, you still followed your instincts to find me. He gestured toward the north, where the forest grew even wilder. Come to Shadowfen. Let me prove what Blake doesn't want you to remember. Every reasonable part of Maya's mind screamed that following a strange alpha into unknown territory was insane, but the connection between them was undeniable. A pull stronger than gravity, older than memory. When Cade extended his hand, she took it without hesitation. The moment their skin touched, electricity shot through her entire nervous system. Images flashed behind her eyes. This same hand tangled in her hair, tracing patterns on her bare skin, holding hers as they ran together through moonlit forests. Her wolf, silent for weeks, suddenly howled with recognition and desperate joy. You feel it too, Cade breathed, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. The mate bond. Blake can steal your memories, but he can't break what's written in your soul. Mate bond. The term unlocked something fundamental in Maya's understanding. Not the political arrangement Blake had described, but something deeper, more primal. A connection that transcended conscious choice and conscious memory. They walked deeper into Shadowfen territory, Cade matching his longer stride to her pace. The landscape grew wilder with each mile, less manicured than Moonridge, but somehow more honest. Maya found herself relaxing for the first time since waking in the hospital, her body recognizing safety in a way her mind couldn't yet process. Tell me about us, she said, as they navigated a creek bed filled with smooth stones. How did we meet? When did I choose you? Cade's expression softened with memory. You came to negotiate a border dispute. Blake sent you because he thought a woman would seem less threatening. You were fierce, brilliant, completely unimpressed by pack politics. He helped her over a fallen log, his touch lingering. I knew within an hour that you were my mate. It took you longer to accept it. Because of Blake. Because you'd been promised to him since childhood. Because leaving him meant leaving everything you'd ever known. His voice grew rougher. I never asked you to choose, Maya. You made that decision yourself. When you realized Blake was using fear and control to maintain power. When you discovered what he'd done to secure his position. What he'd done. Maya filed that information away, sensing it was crucial to understanding the larger picture. But right now, all that mattered was the warmth spreading through her chest as Cade spoke about their relationship. Not ownership disguised as love, but partnership between equals. Shadowfen territory proper began at a natural stone archway carved by centuries of wind and water. The moment Maya passed through it, her wolf surged to full awareness for the first time since the hospital. Not just awake, but jubilant. recognizing home in a way that made tears spring to her eyes. "Welcome back," Cade said softly. And Maya realized he wasn't just talking about the territory. He was welcoming back the woman she'd been before Blake stole her memories. The person who'd been brave enough to choose love over obligation. As they approached the heart of Shadowfen, Maya felt pieces of herself clicking back into place. Not memories exactly, but instincts and preferences that felt authentically her own. This place, this man, this connection that blazed between them despite every obstacle Blake had placed in their path. She still didn't remember their history, but she was beginning to remember who she really was. And that woman would never have been content as Blake Sterling's perfect, obedient mate. "How do I get my memories back?" she asked, as Shadowfen's main settlement came into view. Smaller than Moonridge, but infinitely more welcoming. "Time," Cade said. "Truth, and being around the people and places that knew the real you." His hand found hers again, solid and reassuring. "But Maya, even if your memories never fully return, know this. The woman I fell in love with is still here. I can see her in your eyes, in the way you escaped Blake's golden cage to find answers. Memory or no memory, you're still the bravest person I know." As they walked into Shadowfen together, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced since waking up. Hope. Real hope. Not the manufactured comfort Blake offered, but the possibility of reclaiming a life worth remembering. Chapter 4. Fragments of Truth. Living in Shadowfen was like discovering she could breathe properly for the first time in weeks. Cade had given Maya a cabin on the edge of the settlement, close enough for protection, far enough to avoid pressure. The space felt immediately familiar in ways Blake's pristine house never had. Worn leather furniture that invited actual use, books scattered on surfaces, windows that opened to let in forest sounds instead of manufactured silence. "This was yours," Cade explained, watching her trail fingers over a wooden desk scarred with use. "You started staying here 3 months ago when..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "When things with Blake became unbearable." Maya opened the desk drawers, finding notebooks filled with her own handwriting. The entries were coded, careful, but even without context, she could see they documented something important. Dates, locations, meetings between Blake and people whose names meant nothing to her damaged memory, but felt significant anyway. "What was I investigating?" she asked, holding up a notebook where she'd apparently drawn connections between various pack leaders and suspicious financial transactions. Blake's consolidation of power. He wasn't content ruling just Moonridge. Cade settled into a chair across from her, giving her space to process. For the past 2 years, he's been systematically forcing smaller packs into submission through blackmail, economic pressure, and when necessary, violence. You discovered his methods when you were sent to negotiate with packs that had suddenly become cooperative after resisting Moonridge influence for decades. The information should have shocked her, but Maya found herself nodding as if confirming suspicions she'd carried without conscious awareness. The nervous way people looked at me in Moonridge. They weren't concerned about my memory loss. They were afraid. Your father was Derek's predecessor as Blake's beta, a good man who started asking inconvenient questions about Blake's business practices. Cade's voice grew gentler. He died in what Blake called a training accident 6 months before you and I met. The words hit Maya like physical blows. Her father, dead because he'd threatened Blake's plans. Suddenly, the locked room in Blake's house made perfect sense. He'd been slowly erasing evidence of who she'd been before their supposed relationship, creating a sanitized version of her life that supported his narrative. "Show me," she said quietly. "Show me everything." Over the next several days, Cade became her guide through a past Blake had tried to steal. He took her to places she'd apparently loved. A waterfall where they'd spent hours talking. A meadow where she'd practiced combat training with Shadowfen fighters. The archive building where she'd researched pack histories and territorial laws. Each location triggered flashes of recognition, fragments too brief to be called memories, but substantial enough to feel real. Maya standing in the waterfall spray, laughing at something Cade had said. Maya throwing a Shadowfen warrior twice her size during sparring practice. Maya bent over ancient texts, building the case that would eventually expose Blake's crimes. "You were brilliant," Cade said, as they stood in the archive where dust motes danced through afternoon sunlight. "Not just intelligent, but strategically minded. You understood that Blake's greatest weakness was his need to appear legitimate. Everything he did, he documented to justify later if questioned. You turned his own arrogance against him. Maya traced her fingers over research tables where she'd apparently spent countless hours. But he found out before I could use the evidence. He found out about us first. Cade's voice carried old pain. Blake had you followed when you started spending time here. Confronted you with photos of us together. Demanded you choose between exposing him and protecting me. What did I choose? Though Maya suspected she already knew the answer. Both. Cade's smile was proud and heartbroken. You told him you were leaving Moonridge regardless, that you'd already made copies of your evidence and hidden them where he couldn't reach. Then you announced that you were choosing me as your mate. The scene played out in Maya's imagination with startling clarity, herself standing defiant before Blake's fury, refusing to be intimidated or controlled. For a moment, she could almost remember the feeling of that choice, the terrifying freedom of finally acting on her own desires instead of pack expectations. He hurt me that night, she said. Not quite a question. Cade nodded grimly. Beat you unconscious, then staged the car accident to explain your injuries. Probably hoped the head trauma would be permanent, that you'd never remember what you'd discovered, or the choice you'd made. His hands clenched with barely contained rage. I found you 12 hours later, more dead than alive, and brought you to the human hospital where they could treat injuries that severe. You visited every day until Blake arrived. Another piece clicking into place from her conversation with the nurse. I couldn't risk staying once he showed up. Blake would have killed you rather than let you return to me. Cade's voice roughened with emotion. Watching him play the devoted fiancé while you looked at me like a stranger was the hardest thing I've ever endured. Maya studied his face, seeing genuine anguish beneath his controlled exterior. This wasn't manipulation or performance. Cade was showing her a heart broken by loss and desperate hope in equal measure. Whatever Blake had told her about dangerous Shadow Fen wolves, this man would die before harming her. That evening, as Maya sorted through more of her belongings in the cabin, she found a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf. Inside was a collection of items that felt like treasures from a life she'd lost. Letters from her father, warning her to be careful around Blake, photographs of herself with Shadow Fen pack members who'd clearly accepted her as family, and a small digital recorder. Her hands shook as she pressed play. If someone is listening to this, it means Blake has either killed me or found a way to make me disappear. Her own voice, strong and determined, filled the cabin. Everything I've documented about his activities is accurate. Financial records are hidden in the Shadow Fen archives under Territorial Law Code Section 7. Photos and correspondence are with Cade Hunter, who has sworn to protect them regardless of what happens to me. The recording continued with specific details about Blake's consolidation of power. Packs forced into submission, leaders who disappeared after refusing cooperation, financial arrangements that amounted to protection rackets. Maya listened to her past self methodically building a case that could destroy Blake's reputation and authority. I want it on record that I'm making this choice freely, past Maya continued. Blake Sterling has never been my chosen mate. The arrangement between our families was political. Agreed to, when I was too young to object. I choose Cade Hunter as my true mate, and I choose to stand with Shadow Fen against Moonridge tyranny. Whatever Blake does in retaliation, I accept the consequences. The recording ended with coordinates for additional evidence caches and a message that made present Maya's eyes fill with tears. To whoever I become after this, you are stronger than Blake Sterling believes. You always have been. Find Cade. Find the truth. Fight back. Cade appeared in the doorway as if summoned by her emotional state. You found it. I remember recording this, Maya whispered, the memory crystalline and perfect. Not everything, but this moment. I was terrified but determined. She looked up at him, seeing her past self's choice reflected in his storm-gray eyes. I really did choose you. You did. He approached slowly, giving her space to retreat if needed. Not because of mate bonds or destiny, but because you saw who I really was and decided you wanted to build something real together. Maya stood, closing the distance between them until she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Show me, she said softly. Show me what I chose. Cade's hands framed her face with infinite gentleness. Are you sure? Your memories are still fragmented. I don't want you choosing me because of who you used to be. I'm choosing you because of who I am now. Maya's voice carried certainty that surprised her with its strength. Blake spent weeks trying to convince me I was someone else. Someone passive and obedient. But the woman on that recording, the woman who investigated corruption and chose love over duty, that's still me. I can feel her. When Cade kissed her, it was like coming home to a place she'd never truly left. Her body remembered what her mind had forgotten. The taste of him, the way he held her like she was precious but not fragile. The electric connection that blazed between them regardless of amnesia or manipulation. Maya's wolf finally, completely awakened, howling with joy at the reunion her human half was just beginning to understand. As Cade held her close, she felt pieces of herself snapping back into alignment. Not the sanitized version Blake had tried to create, but the real woman who'd been brave enough to fight for truth and love. She still didn't remember everything, but she remembered enough. Enough to know Blake had stolen months of her life through deception and violence. Enough to understand that her choice of Cade over duty had been the first truly free decision she'd made in years. And now, with her mate's arms around her and evidence of Blake's crimes in her hands, Maya began planning how to reclaim everything he'd taken from her. Chapter 5. Sins Unveiled. Maya had been in Shadowfen for 6 days when Blake came for her, and he didn't come alone. The sound of vehicles approached at dawn, more than necessary for a simple retrieval, suggesting Blake expected resistance. Cade's entire pack mobilized instantly, warriors taking defensive positions while non-combatants retreated to secured areas. He's brought 20 fighters, reported Elena, Cade's second-in-command, from her scouting position. Armed and positioned like they're planning a siege, not a negotiation. Maya stood beside Cade in the main clearing, her recovered memories now complete enough to understand the stakes. This wasn't about retrieving a confused amnesia victim. This was about preventing her from exposing crimes that could destroy Blake's carefully constructed empire. Blake emerged from the lead vehicle looking every inch the righteous alpha defending his territory and mate. His golden hair caught morning sunlight, his amber eyes blazing with manufactured fury, his posture radiating the kind of authority that convinced weaker wolves to submit without question. Behind him, his fighters spread out in practiced formation. Maya? He called across the clearing, his voice carrying disappointment and concern that would have fooled anyone who didn't know better. Thank God you're safe. We've all been so worried. Safe from what? Maya stepped forward, ignoring Cade's protective instinct to keep her behind him. From remembering the truth about what you did to me? Blake's expression shifted through several emotions. Surprise, calculation, and finally cold anger. I see this savage has filled your head with lies. That's what happens when brain injuries leave you vulnerable to manipulation. The only manipulation happened in your house. Maya's voice carried across the clearing with crystal clarity. 3 weeks of you feeding me false memories while my real life was locked away in a room you didn't think I'd find. A murmur went through Blake's fighters. Some looked genuinely confused, as if they'd believed Blake's version of events. Others watched their alpha with the wary attention of people who'd seen his true nature, but never dared question it. You're not well, Maya. Blake took a step forward, his tone gentle but his eyes hard. This place, these people, they're taking advantage of your condition. Let me take you home where you can receive proper medical care. Home. Maya laughed, the sound sharp with bitter amusement. You mean the prison you built to keep me controlled and compliant? The shrine to a woman who never existed outside your fantasies of the perfect, obedient mate. Blake's mask slipped completely. You belong with your pack. With me. I won't let these animals corrupt you further. Animals? Cade's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Interesting choice of words from someone who beats unconscious women and stages accidents to cover his crimes. You have no proof of any... Actually, I do. Maya pulled the digital recorder from her pocket, holding it up for everyone to see. My own voice, detailing everything you've done to consolidate power. Every pack you've forced into submission. Every leader who mysteriously died or disappeared after refusing your demands. Blake's entire force shifted uneasily. Maya could see the moment several of his fighters began questioning what they'd been told about this retrieval mission. You're talking about forged evidence, Blake said desperately. Everyone knows digital recordings can be manipulated. Then let's discuss the physical evidence. Maya's voice grew stronger with each word. Financial records showing payments to assassins after pack leaders refused your terms. Correspondence proving you arranged my father's death because he discovered your activities. Photographs of you meeting with criminals who specialize in making problems disappear. The clearing fell silent, except for the whisper of wind through pine trees. Blake's fighters were openly staring at their alpha now, seeing him not as righteous leader but as the man Maya was describing. Manipulative, violent, drunk on power. Even if any of that were true, Blake said, his voice dropping to something dangerous and desperate. You think anyone would believe a woman who can't remember her own name? A damaged mind makes unreliable witness. But I remember now. Maya stepped closer, close enough to see the panic starting to crack Blake's controlled facade. I remember you finding the evidence I'd gathered. I remember you screaming that I was ungrateful, that you'd given me everything. And this was how I repaid you. I remember you saying you'd rather see me dead than with him. She gestured toward Cade without taking her eyes off Blake. I remember you hitting me so hard I saw stars, then continuing to beat me while I was down. I remember thinking I was going to die, and that you'd probably tell everyone it was a training accident, just like you did with my father. Blake's fighters were backing away from him now, several reaching for weapons but unsure who they should be pointing them at. The carefully constructed loyalty Blake had built through fear and manipulation was crumbling as Maya spoke. You want to know what I remember most clearly? Maya's voice carried deadly quiet across the clearing. I remember choosing Cade over you, not because of mate bonds or pack politics, but because when I looked at him, I saw partnership instead of ownership. I saw someone who valued my strength instead of trying to break it. You lying... Blake lunged forward, his control finally snapping completely. He never reached her. Cade intercepted the attack with fluid grace, catching Blake's arm and using his own momentum to send him sprawling. But Blake recovered quickly, shifting into his wolf form with the speed of desperation. His wolf was impressive, golden fur that matched his hair, powerful frame built for dominance. But as he charged toward Maya with murderous intent, something extraordinary happened. His own fighters, the men who'd followed him for years, stepped between him and his target. Stand down, Derek called out, his voice shaking but determined. This isn't what we signed up for, Blake. If what she's saying is true... Blake's wolf snarled, but he was outnumbered and he knew it. Slowly, reluctantly, he shifted back to human form, naked and vulnerable in ways that had nothing to do with clothing. You have no idea what you're doing, he said to his own fighters, his voice raw with betrayal. She's turned you against your own alpha. You turned us against you. Derek replied sadly. We followed you because we believed you were protecting the pack. But attacking your own mate? Covering up murder? He shook his head. That's not leadership. That's tyranny. The fight went out of Blake all at once, leaving him looking smaller somehow, diminished by the loss of others' fear. You think you've won, he said to Maya, but his voice held defeat rather than threat. You think exposing me will change anything. There will always be another alpha ready to take power through strength. Maybe, Maya acknowledged, but there will also always be people ready to stand up to them. People who choose justice over comfort, truth over convenience. She looked around at Blake's former fighters, at Cade's pack members, at everyone who'd witnessed this confrontation. People who remember that real strength protects instead of terrorizes. What happened next surprised everyone, including Maya herself. Blake didn't fight or threaten or try to bargain. Instead, he collapsed to his knees in the dirt, the weight of his exposed crimes and lost authority crushing him completely. I loved you, he whispered, looking up at Maya with genuine anguish. Everything I did was to protect you, to build something worthy of you. No, Maya said firmly, but not without compassion. You loved the idea of possessing me. You loved having something beautiful and rare that belonged only to you. But you never loved me enough to let me choose my own path. Blake's remaining resistance crumbled entirely. As Derek and the other former Moonridge fighters restrained their fallen alpha, Maya felt something she hadn't expected. Not triumph, but profound sadness for what Blake could have been if he'd chosen partnership over domination. But her sadness was tempered by fierce satisfaction. She'd reclaimed her memories, her choices, and her power to stand against injustice. Blake Sterling's reign of fear was over, and Maya had been the one to end it. As Cade's arms came around her, strong and protective but never possessive, Maya realized this was what freedom felt like. Not the absence of connection, but the presence of connection freely chosen and mutually respected. The war between their packs was over before it truly began, ended not by violence, but by truth. And Maya had never felt more like herself than she did in that moment, standing strong beside the mate she'd chosen and the pack that had welcomed her home. Chapter 6. Blood and Reckoning. Blake's surrender should have ended everything, but Maya had underestimated his capacity for desperate revenge. 3 days after his public humiliation, he escaped Derek's custody during transport to the Interpack Council for formal judgment. The news reached Shadowfen at dawn, carried by a breathless messenger who'd ridden through the night. He took 6 fighters with him, the messenger reported between gasps for air. The ones still loyal despite everything. Derek says they're armed and dangerous, and Blake was screaming about making everyone pay for their betrayal. Maya felt ice settle in her stomach. A Blake with nothing left to lose was infinitely more dangerous than one trying to maintain his reputation. "He'll come here," she told Cade as they gathered in the pack's council chamber. This is where it started for him, where he lost control of the narrative. "Let him come." Cade's voice was granite hard. "We're ready." But Maya shook her head. "You don't understand. Blake doesn't just want me back anymore. He wants to destroy everything I chose over him. That means Shadowfen. That means you. That means anyone who helped expose his crimes." Her prediction proved accurate within hours. Blake's first strike came at the settlement's outer perimeter, a coordinated attack on 3 guard posts simultaneously. The assault was brutal and efficient, designed not just to breach defenses but to send a message about Blake's new willingness to shed blood. "He's changed tactics," Elena reported grimly, her arm bandaged from the initial skirmish. "This isn't about retrieving Maya anymore. He's trying to provoke a full territorial war." The revelation came with Blake's next move, attacking pack families in outlying cabins, targeting children and elderly members who couldn't defend themselves. It was a calculated escalation designed to force Cade into either submission or retaliation that would justify Blake's actions to other pack leaders. He's trying to frame this as righteous war, Maya realized as they received reports of the attacks. If he can make it look like Shadowfen started the violence, other packs might support him despite everything we've exposed. Cade's jaw clenched with barely controlled fury. Then we end this before he can hurt anyone else. But ending it proved more complex than anticipated. Blake had chosen his remaining fighters carefully, wolves who'd benefited from his corrupt system and had everything to lose from his downfall. They fought with the desperation of people who knew defeat meant exile or execution. The decisive confrontation came at sunset, when Blake launched a direct assault on Shadowfen's main settlement. Maya stood on the council building's steps, watching enemy fighters emerge from the forest like vengeful shadows. Blake himself led the charge, his golden hair wild, his amber eyes blazing with manic determination. "Maya Sterling," his voice carried across the clearing, using the surname she'd never legally taken. "Come home willingly, and I'll spare these savages. Continue this rebellion, and I'll burn Shadowfen to ash around you." "My name is Maya Winters," she called back, her voice ringing with absolute conviction. "I was never yours to claim, and I never will be." Blake's response was to shift into his wolf form and charge directly at her, abandoning all pretense of civilized combat. But Maya was ready for him this time. She'd spent the past week training with Shadowfen's warriors, relearning combat skills that muscle memory had preserved even when her mind forgot. Her own shift was fluid, natural, her red-brown wolf meeting Blake's golden charge head-on. They collided in the center of the clearing with bone-jarring force, rolling and snapping as the battle raged around them. Blake was larger and physically stronger, but Maya fought with the fury of someone who'd been systematically betrayed and manipulated. Every bite, every claw strike, carried the weight of stolen memories and violated trust. When Blake tried to pin her, She twisted away and went for his throat with surgical precision. The fight might have continued indefinitely, if not for Blake's fatal error. In his rage and desperation, he made a choice that shocked even his most loyal followers. He deliberately targeted Elena's young daughter, who'd been helping evacuate civilians from the battle zone. The child's terrified scream cut through the chaos like a blade. Maya saw Blake's wolf changing direction, abandoning their personal combat to hunt something small and helpless. Her own wolf responded with protective fury that transcended rational thought. Maya intercepted Blake's charge, taking claws meant for a child across her own ribs. The pain was immediate and severe, but it fueled rather than hindered her response. She locked her jaws around Blake's throat and held on despite his frantic attempts to dislodge her. Stop. The word came from Derek, who'd arrived with reinforcements from the main Moonridge settlement. But he wasn't talking to Maya. He was talking to his own fighters, Blake's remaining loyal followers who'd frozen at the sight of their alpha trying to murder a child. This isn't war, Derek continued, his voice carrying across the battlefield. This is madness. Look at what he's become. One by one, Blake's fighters stepped back, lowering their weapons, refusing to continue following someone who'd attack innocents. Even in wolf form, Blake seemed to understand his complete abandonment. His struggles grew weaker, more desperate, until he finally shifted back to human form beneath Maya's relentless grip. Please, he gasped, blood running from the punctures Maya's teeth had left in his throat. I loved you. Everything I did was for love. Maya released him and shifted back to human form, standing over Blake's broken figure. Love doesn't steal memories. Love doesn't manipulate and control and terrorize. What you felt was ownership, and I was never your property to possess. Blake tried to rise, to make one final desperate attack, but his body betrayed him. The injuries from their fight, combined with the psychological devastation of losing everything he'd built, left him shaking and defeated in the dirt. Kill me, he whispered, looking up at Maya with genuine desperation. I can't live knowing you chose him over everything we could have been. No, Maya said quietly. You're going to live with the consequences of your choices, just like everyone you hurt had to live with the consequences of yours. What killed Blake in the end wasn't violence, but rejection. Complete, total, absolute rejection by everyone whose opinion he'd ever valued. His own fighters stood with Derek, openly condemning their former alpha's actions. Pack leaders from across the region, summoned by reports of the conflict, witnessed his breakdown and found him unfit to lead even himself. Blake Sterling died not from Maya's claws, but from the weight of his own corruption, his heart simply stopping as he realized that everything he'd built through fear and manipulation had crumbled beyond repair. His last words were Maya's name, spoken not with love, but with the bitter regret of someone who destroyed the very thing he'd claimed to treasure. As Blake's body grew still in the blood-soaked clearing, Maya felt no triumph, only profound exhaustion and the hope that his death might finally bring peace to everyone he'd terrorized. Derek approached cautiously, his face etched with shame and sorrow. Maya, I want you to know, not all of us knew the extent of his crimes. When we followed him, we thought we were serving the pack's interests. I know, Maya replied, understanding that Derek and others like him had been victims too, manipulated by Blake's charisma and false righteousness. The question now is what we do next. Around them, wolves from both packs stood together, no longer enemies but survivors of the same corrupt system. Blake's reign of terror was over, but the work of rebuilding would take much longer than the few minutes it had taken to end his life. Maya looked at Cade, saw her own determination reflected in his storm-gray eyes, and knew they would face that rebuilding together, not as alpha and subjugated mate, but as equal partners choosing to create something better from the ashes of Blake's empire. The war was over. Now came the harder task of building peace. Chapter 7. Sacred Bonds. The full moon rising over Shadowfen territory cast silver light across the gathered packs, illuminating faces that had been enemies just weeks before. Maya stood at the edge of the ceremonial clearing, watching wolves from Moonridge and Shadowfen work together to prepare for the joining ritual that would unite their territories under shared leadership. Derek approached carrying an armload of ceremonial torches, his expression still shadowed by guilt, but brightened by genuine hope. "The elders from both packs have agreed to the terms," he reported. "Joint leadership council, shared resources, protection for all pack members regardless of original territory. It's unprecedented, but then again, so is everything else that's happened." Maya nodded, her attention split between the preparations and the man moving through the crowd with easy authority. Cade directed the setup with the same calm competence he brought to everything, ensuring both packs' traditions were honored in the ceremony that would make their mating bond official. "Nervous?" Elena appeared at Maya's elbow, offering a cup of the traditional pre-ceremony tea that was supposed to calm the spirit and open the heart. "Terrified," Maya admitted, accepting the warm cup gratefully. Not of Cade, not of the bond, but of the responsibility. Leading one pack is challenging enough. Two packs with a history of conflict will thrive under leaders who understand both strength and compassion. Elena finished firmly. "You've already proven that, Maya. Look around. These people aren't just coexisting. They're genuinely cooperating." Maya followed Elena's gesture, seeing former Moonridge fighters sharing techniques with Shadowfen warriors, pack mothers from both territories organizing childcare together, elders comparing notes on pack history and law. The integration had been remarkably smooth, helped by the shared trauma of Blake's final violence and the clear evidence of what his methods had truly cost everyone. "The ceremony should begin soon." Cade's voice came from behind her, warm with affection and barely contained anticipation. "Are you ready?" Maya turned to face her mate, her breath catching at the sight of him in traditional ceremonial dress, dark leather and silver clasps that emphasized his warrior status, tribal markings painted on his chest and arms that told the story of his leadership and lineage. But it was his eyes that held her. Storm gray, filled with such deep love and respect that her own heart raced in response. "I've been ready since the moment I chose you," she said, setting down her teacup to trace the painted symbols on his chest. "Though I have to admit, doing this in front of two entire packs feels more intimidating than facing Blake in combat." Cade's laugh rumbled through his chest beneath her palm. "At least if you change your mind, no one will try to beat you unconscious and stage your death." The dark humor should have been inappropriate, but Maya found herself smiling. They'd both learned to find lightness where they could, understanding that healing required both acknowledgement of trauma and the courage to move beyond it. "Maya," Derek's voice interrupted the moment, his tone formal but warm. "As senior surviving member of your father's bloodline, I'm here to ask the traditional question." Maya straightened, recognizing the ritual from half-remembered pack ceremonies. Derek represented her family in the absence of parents who should have been there to witness this moment. The grief was sharp but no longer consuming. She'd learned to carry loss without letting it define her. "Maya Winters, daughter of David Winters, do you choose this mate freely, without coercion or obligation?" Derek's voice carried across the clearing, ensuring everyone could witness her response. "I do," Maya replied clearly. "I choose Cade Hunter as my mate, my partner, my equal. I choose to bind my life to his, my pack to his, my future to whatever we build together." A murmur of approval rose from both packs. The formal declarations continued as the moon reached its zenith, traditional words that took on new meaning when spoken between equals rather than enforced through political arrangement. When Cade spoke his own vows, his voice rough with emotion, Maya felt their mate bond strengthen and deepen in ways that transcended the supernatural connection they'd already shared. This wasn't just about recognizing what existed. It was about choosing to nurture and protect what they were building together. "The marking," the ceremony elder announced, producing the silver blade that would be used to create the permanent scars that would mark them as mated pair. Maya extended her wrist without hesitation, watching Cade do the same. The blade was sharp, the cuts precise and shallow, enough to leave scars but not enough to cause serious harm. As their blood mingled, dropped onto the sacred ground of the clearing, Maya felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of herself. She was no longer Maya Winters, daughter of a murdered beta, survivor of Blake's manipulation. She was Maya Winters Hunter, co-leader of a united territory, partner to a mate who valued her strength, protector of wolves who'd chosen to follow her vision of leadership through service rather than domination. The transformation that followed was unlike any shift Maya had experienced. Her wolf emerged not in response to anger or fear, but from pure joy and completion. Beside her, Cade's own transformation mirrored hers, their wolves running together through the moonlit forest with the pack streaming behind them like a living celebration. When they returned to human form hours later, alone in the cabin that had become truly theirs, Maya felt pieces of herself she hadn't even known were missing click into place. The woman she'd been before Blake's manipulation. The woman she'd become through surviving his abuse. And the woman she was choosing to be moving forward. All integrated into someone stronger and more complete than she'd ever imagined possible. "Any regrets?" Cade asked softly, pulling her close against his chest as they lay tangled in blankets that smelled of pine and ceremony smoke. "Only that it took losing my memory to find myself," Maya replied, tracing the fresh scar on his wrist that matched her own. "Though maybe that's how it had to happen. Maybe I needed to be stripped down to nothing to really understand who I wanted to become." Cade's arms tightened around her. "You were always strong, Maya. Blake's manipulation couldn't change that. It could only hide it for a while. We're going to have challenges ahead," Maya said, thinking about the practical realities of governing a united territory, managing resources, dealing with other pack leaders who might see their success as a threat to traditional power structures. "We'll face them together," Cade promised. "Equal partners in everything." Maya smiled against his shoulder, feeling their mate bond pulse with shared contentment and determination. Tomorrow would bring the complex work of leadership, the ongoing process of healing their people and building something sustainable from the wreckage Blake had left behind. But tonight was theirs. A celebration of choosing love over fear, partnership over possession, hope over the darkness that had tried to consume them both. As Maya drifted toward sleep in her mate's arms, surrounded by the sounds of their united pack settling in for the night, she felt truly safe for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed. Blake Sterling had tried to steal her identity, her memories, her choices. Instead, he'd inadvertently freed her to become someone stronger than she'd ever imagined. The woman who'd been afraid to challenge pack traditions was gone, replaced by a leader who understood that real strength came from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. Maya Winters Hunter fell asleep, planning the future she and Cade would build together, confident that whatever challenges awaited, they would meet them as equals, partners, and mates who'd chosen each other despite every obstacle placed in their path. Chapter 8. New Horizons. 6 months after the mating ceremony that united Shadowfen and Moonridge, Maya stood in the council chamber they'd built at the boundary between territories, watching young wolves practice combat techniques that emphasized defense and de-escalation over domination. The training ground outside buzzed with activity as pack members who'd once viewed each other as enemies worked together to create something unprecedented in pack history. "The Riverside Pack delegation has confirmed their visit next week," Elena reported, setting down a stack of correspondence that represented just a fraction of the interest their united territory had generated. "They want to discuss adopting our governance model for their own leadership succession crisis." Maya nodded, unsurprised. Word had spread quickly through the supernatural community about Shadowfen Moonridge's success with joint leadership and democratic councils. Other packs facing internal power struggles or external threats were beginning to see cooperation as preferable to traditional territorial conflicts. "Any response from the Western Council about our proposal for interpack mediation services?" Maya asked, reviewing the agenda for their afternoon leadership meeting. "Cautiously positive." Elena smiled. "They're concerned about precedent. But they can't argue with our results. Crime down 60%. Resource sharing, eliminating food insecurity, collaborative training, producing stronger fighters who actually know how to work together. The transformation had been remarkable, though not without challenges. Integrating two pack cultures required constant negotiation, compromise, and patience. But Maya had discovered she thrived on the complex problem-solving that leadership demanded, particularly when she had Cade as an equal partner, rather than having to navigate the traditional hierarchy where alpha decisions were rarely questioned. "Maya?" Derek appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral, in the way that meant he had news she probably wouldn't love. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's personal." Maya's blood chilled momentarily. Too many months of Blake's threats had left her with reflexive anxiety about unexpected visitors. But Derek's calm demeanor suggested this wasn't a crisis, and their territory's security was too tight now for genuine threats to reach the council chamber undetected. The visitor waiting in the reception area was a woman Maya didn't recognize. Middle-aged, professionally dressed, with the kind of carefully composed expression that suggested difficult conversations ahead. Maya Winters-Hunter? I'm Dr. Sarah Chen from the Regional Medical Board. I've been investigating the circumstances of your hospitalization 6 months ago. Maya felt Cade's presence before she heard his footsteps, their mate bond alerting her to his approach. His hand settled warmly at the small of her back, offering support without overwhelming the conversation. What kind of investigation? Maya asked carefully. The medical inconsistencies in your case raised flags during a routine audit. Car accident victims don't typically present with the specific pattern of head trauma you sustained, and the hospital staff reported unusual circumstances around your treatment. Dr. Chen opened a thick folder. We've been building a case against Blake Sterling for medical fraud and attempted murder. Blake is dead, Cade said quietly. I'm aware, but there are others involved in covering up what he did to you, and victims of similar crimes who deserve justice. Dr. Chen looked directly at Maya. Your testimony could help other women who've survived intimate partner violence in pack settings. The supernatural community has been protecting abusers for too long, by treating pack justice as separate from legal accountability. Maya exchanged glances with Cade, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. This was bigger than their personal story. This was about changing systems that allowed people like Blake to operate with impunity. What would that involve? Maya asked. The conversation that followed lasted 2 hours, covering legal procedures, protection protocols, and the broader implications of bringing pack leadership accountability into the human legal system. It was groundbreaking work that could change how supernatural communities handled domestic violence and abuse of power. I'll do it, Maya decided, surprising herself with how certain she felt. Not for revenge, but because other women shouldn't have to lose their memories and nearly their lives before anyone takes action against their abusers. After Dr. Chen left, Maya and Cade walked together to their favorite spot overlooking the United Territory. The view from the ridge showed the bustling integration of two communities that had become something entirely new. Children playing together regardless of which pack they'd been born into. Adults collaborating on projects that benefited everyone. Elders sharing stories that wove their separate histories into a common narrative. Are you sure about testifying? Cade asked, as they settled on the sun-warmed rocks that had become their thinking place. Completely, Maya replied, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on her stomach where new life was growing. A secret she'd discovered just that morning, and hadn't yet found the words to share. I want our children to grow up in a world where abuse of power has real consequences, where strong women aren't seen as threats to be broken. Cade went very still beside her. Our children? Maya smiled, love and anticipation and slight terror mixing in her chest. I'm pregnant, Cade. About 2 months along, according to the pack healer. His response was to lift her off the ground and spin her around, his joy infectious and overwhelming. When he set her down, his hands immediately moved to frame her face, his thumbs tracing the curve of her cheekbones with infinite tenderness. Are you happy? She asked, suddenly uncertain despite his obvious delight. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Cade said, his voice rough with emotion. Terrified, amazed, grateful, protective, but yes, incredibly happy. They sat together as the sun moved across the sky, talking about the future they were building for their unborn child and the pack family that would help raise them. Maya found herself thinking about the woman she'd been when she woke up in that hospital. Lost, manipulated, stripped of her identity and autonomy. Do you ever wonder who you would have become if Blake hadn't hurt you? Cade asked, as if reading her thoughts. Maya considered the question seriously. I think I would have been smaller, she said finally. Not physically, but in terms of what I believed I could accomplish. Blake's manipulation was terrible, but surviving it taught me that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. Losing my memory forced me to choose who I wanted to be instead of accepting who others told me I was. No regrets about the path that brought us here? None, Maya said firmly. I wouldn't choose trauma for anyone, but I won't waste the strength I gained from surviving it. If my testimony helps other women find their own strength, then something good will have come from Blake's cruelty. As evening approached, they made their way back to the territory where pack members were gathering for the weekly community meal that had become tradition. Maya watched Cade interact with wolves from both original packs, seeing how naturally he'd adapted to collaborative leadership after years of making decisions alone. "Maya!" a young voice called out, as Rebecca, Elena's daughter, raced toward them with the boundless energy of an 8-year-old wolf. "Will you tell us the story about the brave alpha who learned to share?" Maya laughed, remembering the children's story she'd created about pack cooperation. "After dinner, little wolf. But only if you help serve the elders first." "Deal!" Rebecca scampered off to organize her age mates for their assigned duties. Cade's arm settled around Maya's shoulders as they watched the organized chaos of pack life unfold around them. "She's going to be a handful when her wolf emerges," he observed with amusement. "Good," Maya said firmly. "I want all our young wolves to be handfuls. I want them to question authority, challenge unfairness, and never accept that things have to stay the way they've always been." "Speaking of handfuls," Cade murmured against her ear, "what kind of parent do you think our child will drive us to become?" Maya smiled, imagining a small wolf with Cade's eyes and her own stubborn determination. The kind who lead by example instead of fear. The kind who teach strength through service, not domination. The kind who make sure our child knows they're loved for who they are, not who we need them to be. As they joined their pack family for the evening meal, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she'd been a broken woman with stolen memories, trapped in a life that wasn't really hers. Tonight, she was a leader, a mate, an expectant mother, and a survivor who'd transformed trauma into purpose. The woman who'd woken up in that hospital bed had been searching for her identity in fragments of the past. The woman sitting here now knew that identity wasn't something to be recovered. It was something to be consciously created, day by day, choice by choice, relationship by relationship. Maya Winters Hunter had found her way home, not by remembering who she used to be, but by choosing who she wanted to become. And as she looked around at the life she and Cade had built together, she knew the best parts of their story were still being written. The future stretched ahead of them, full of challenges and possibilities, written not in destiny or tradition, but in the daily choice to love authentically, lead with integrity, and build something better for the generations that would follow. Maya had never been more ready to meet whatever came next.